It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here back with another AFL round review. And joining me, a very good friend of the podcast, somebody that's been on several times. He's joining me again just because a few scheduling situations has led me to grab a backup, and always one of the guys I like going to, Mr. Rick Shaibani of the LA Dragons. Rick, thank you for joining me, sir.
Yes, sir. In the new official Dragons pull-up, no less. So, yeah.
Looks snazzy. Absolutely fantastic, sir. You joined me on a fascinating week, round 16, really quickly. Thoughts on an interesting round. And I know I see that big old smile on your face after your Giants get a gutty win up in Alice Springs.
Absolutely. First ever game for GWS in Alice and in the pissing down rain, no less. And I mean, they play one game a year in the desert, and that one game a year, it's pissing down rain. Go figure. But it sucked because, like, only about, I think it was like 3,500, 4,000 fans, and it's not a big ground to begin with. But hey, they love their footy up there, rain or shine, and the Giants got it done. I was cautiously optimistic going into it, especially given Melbourne's forward line issues in the last few rounds. Definitely exacerbated by the Bailey Fritch injury. That did not look good. But no, yeah, the Giants hung in there. They got it done. They've kind of strung together a few nice wins now. It's been really encouraging to see, and winning a lot of close games too. So I reckon Kingsley, his culture has really taken hold. It helps when you have guys like Josh Kelly and Toby Green helping manage that transition. Can't say enough about the leadership group of the Giants this year. And, we knew it was going to be a work in progress. And, but I predicted we finished 12th on the ladder in a rebuilding year, and we might knock on the door of the eight. But as far as I'm concerned, it's been really good to see, we knew it would just be kind of like there's still talent on the list. Again, Liam Cameron era didn't end well, but there was definitely a lot of stuff to build on. So I think Kingsley, took a few rounds to get the hang of his system, but I reckon the boys are really playing strong. So
Definitely, for sure. And so many good ones. Let's jump right into it. Thursday night footy. I was super excited for this one. Unfortunately, I had to get up and watch the replay. And in some situations, I'm glad I did, because this game got ugly quickly, and never, ever came close, as the Brisbane Lions with an 81-point smashing of the Richmond Tigers, 134-53. And as I've said numerous times, this team, the Lions at the Gabba, they almost become the triple premiership team. It's like they're unbeatable. It is scary good how good the
very much
Lions
so.
are on their home patch.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I didn't look up the exact record, but I think their record at the Gabba the last 5 years is even better than Geelong at the Cattery. So it's incredible how loud it gets up at the Gabba, and that home ground advantage. I put it up right up there with Adelaide Oval or Cardinia or any of those really great home field advantages. Now, of course, Brisbane, they're in that in between category. They're catching fire at the right time, but we all know their record at the MCG is not good. They need that home final. So if they can finish top two, it's entirely possible that they can finally break through to the grand final. But it seems like it's a recurring theme with them. They always seem to either A, drop one game that they can't afford to drop, or B, lose a game of the G. But comprehensive beatdown of Richmond, they looked fantastic. Like Brisbane's engine room really is phenomenal. It's been firing on all cylinders, even without, Zorko. So they've done a really solid job all around. And you can say, you can even say something about, like, I know it was a bit controversial with Daniel Rich and Jack Dunstan kind of voluntarily standing themselves down and saying, hey, our form isn't where it is, and we need to just like step aside and let other guys take over at our positions. And I'm sure they copped a bit of criticism for that, but it's lit a fire under them to some degree, because they've won 3 on the trot, if I'm not mistaken. So Brisbane is catching fire at the right time.
And it's kind of a situation, I know I've heard a few rumblings in some of the media that Fagan may have let the cat out of the bag, that it might not have been exactly that way, that they basically may have been said, your form is not there. We're gonna try to save you a little bit of face by saying that you volunteered, but you're basically dropped. You're not going to play VFL because your skill level. They think they just needed some training things again. How valid those rumors are, I don't know. Is this Fagan trying to save face with them? I don't know. I'm really not going to go to it, but I almost want to take it like this with almost on the other side with Richmond is that Hopper rejoins the team, and I think a lot of people thought, well, Taranto's absolutely in fuego fire. You add Hopper, and then they
Yeah.
lose Dusty before this game starts, and it was like this team let the air was let out of the team balloon before they even got started. Is Dusty that big a change to this team? I don't think so. I just honestly think they ran into an engine room that was in fuego with some of the absolute elite. I mean, Josh Dunkley has probably, next to Isaac Rankin at Adelaide, has been the bring in of the year, the recruit of the year, in my opinion. Neil is back to his top form. You're seeing Ashcroft show his absolute reason why he was the number one. Jasper Fletcher is coming in and playing incredibly well. Hugh McCluggage is back from that absolutely disgusting injury, the disgusting concussion with James Sicily. Jared Berry's playing really well on the wings. So this is an engine room that on its day can be absolutely deadly. There isn't a bad person in there. Cam Reyna has found his spot instead of being kind of buried in the defensive line. Now that they've got him in that half forward spot, he's
Yep.
absolutely flourishing. Danaher kicks five. Cameron's at least noticeable. Hipwood, except for the whole drama with the messing with Noah Bolta after one of the plays, which I
Right.
saw that Chief absolutely laid into him on Fox Footy about maybe the AFL should look into maybe stopping taunting. So I thought that was a fascinating little thought process. Did you get a chance to see that? Because I have to give Chief a little bit of credit there. He went at it and he did not hold back on this one.
I did not get a chance to see that, unfortunately. But I mean, like taunting's not really in spirit of the game. We know there's plenty of back and forth, there's plenty of sledging, and like there's nothing wrong with a little bit of that kind of thing. But in terms of just like being egregious about it, then yeah, like there's maybe a case to be made for that. So
Mhm.
I understand where that argument's coming from, but I didn't really I missed the incident in question, and so I can't really
Well, if you get it,
comment
if you
on
get a chance, try to find it because Jason Dunstall goes off. Chief
Oh, I
goes
love Chief.
absolutely off. I
He's
absolutely love it.
well, Chief is the
So
best kind of opinionated. Agree with him or disagree
he's
with him, he's a show.
he's as blunt as you come. He does not hold punches. He doesn't throw curveballs. He is very much right at your head. So
And
I
how
kind of
about
appreciate that.
right? And hey, you did not mention him, but how about Connor McKenna? Of course,
Mhm.
he's come back into the league with a new side this year, and how do you like that? 22 disposals and 6 marks on the weekend.
Yeah, and
So,
Kitty Coleman finding his form. He had been really down. I had mentioned that to a couple people. I said Kitty Coleman last year was absolutely elite, and he had kind of been down all year. And I think he kind of found his form a little bit. So it'd be fun to watch Kitty Coleman and how the rest of his season goes. Like I said, without Rich there, can Kitty Coleman, Connor McKenna, and Darcy Wilmot kind of control that halfback line like they did, because they were absolutely elite in this game. So we go from an absolute drubbing to what some people call a drubby game, because we go to Friday night footy as the Swans and Cats play to a 54-54 draw. And I will put on Red Hat Donnie just for a little spit. I got several messages from friends who were supporters of other teams. They go, how hard was that getting up to watch that game? And I
hey,
will
I
tell you,
cannot.
everything outside of 50, I think the Swans played really well. I think the Swans had a really good game plan. I think Horst Longmire really caught coach the Geelong Cats by surprise, attacking the corridor a lot more effectively than they had previous rounds. And
Sure.
it caught the Cats off guard a little bit. They adjusted come the halftime. Then the Swans started having a few troubles. They were kind of trying to force a few in, and it kind of caused a little turn. And I think it really let Geelong back in the game. But I mean, everybody's going to talk about some of the egregious misses and the 18 behind kicked, especially the Fox one with like a minute left. And
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of hair, and I almost pulled a few strands out because I couldn't believe that one hit the post. Robbie
Yeah.
Fox is a defender. Like, I agree with many of the people. Robbie Fox is a defender and a good defender. He's not a
Yeah.
forward. I don't really
Right.
understand the
Good
thought
defenders don't
process
kick
there.
goals. It's a proven fact.
Unfortunately. So I mean,
Right. I mean, it
I'm
was
one of
ugly.
those,
It just
you know.
was.
Yeah, let me finish my point here. I'm one of those. If I'm a Geelong fan, I thank the Lord I got 2 points because they probably shouldn't have. They probably deserve 0 points out of this. If
Oh
Fox
yeah.
kicks that goal, the Swans win it because they'll sit back defensively after the bounce, and they'll probably hold on the last minute unless Geelong gets a nice wave of. But this was one of those where 2 points I think was apropos because neither team
Sure.
really played well enough to win for the entire game. So as I told a few of my Cats mates, and I think they kind of agreed with me, I said 2 points for both teams kind of apropos. Both teams had moments where they played well,
Yeah.
and then had moments where they were absolute shizen. So your thought, did you get a chance to see this game? Because I I can only
Unfortunately, I
imagine
did.
what a neutral thought of this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, I did, and it was painful. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, they became memes. You know, the reactions of Buddy in the box, and just like so many, just cringe-inducing misses, and not just behind, but like out on the full. It was just like I was wondering if you and your fellow Swan fans were getting whiplash from 205 points one week or the next. How does that happen? But I totally agree with what you were saying. It was almost like neither team wanted to win. One of the most I know it wasn't the first grand final rematch because they did play earlier in the year, of course, but still one of the most anticlimactic grand final rematches of recent memory. I definitely think, you know, we know both teams are very vulnerable. Both of them might miss the eight at this rate, but I reckon that most of the time, like draws, they just they leave that sour taste in you. They just make you feel weird. And as a coach, you do kind of have to treat them as losses because it wasn't a win and it wasn't the 4 points. And for a time of year where percentage is really, really, really important, like you can't afford a draw, you can't afford 54 points. So definitely really tough pill to swallow for both teams. And I know they'll both be wishing they had better shots on goal for sure. So I think
Definitely.
I think, and this was, and I think I give John Longmire a lot of credit, and as a Giants fan, I give the Swans a lot of credit because like what's been so crazy about them this year is because like they do draft really well, they do develop talent really well. John Longmire has a great system, and it's almost tempting to give him the benefit of the doubt every year and be like, oh yeah, they might have lost some talent, but they'll be fine. And like normally they have enough depth to make up for the injuries that they've had, but this year it's just been such a flat season, and to a large extent it's the same thing for Geelong, just because really shocking coming off a flag. So, but yeah, I think this time this game kind of exposed like ordinarily again the tendency is to think, oh, the Swans will figure it out. Horse has a great system; it'll work itself out. They've looked fine without Buddy in the past, but this was the first game where the future without Buddy, because assuming he'll retire at the end of the year, doesn't look too promising. And I think there's definitely plenty of work to be done. But they do have a winnable game against Richmond this coming weekend, so we'll see how it goes. They're still not neither Geelong nor Sydney is technically mathematically out of the finals conversation, but they need everything to go right.
If I do my math correctly, I would probably say the Sydney Swans Richmond game is pretty much an eliminator because if somebody wins that one, the other is done. And you pretty much have to win out because you have to hope that a few teams above you, and they don't have a lot of matchups with it. Now you have some top four matchups still left for both sides. So I think there's still the opportunity. I think, like I said, I think the draw benefited Geelong more than it benefited the Swans, just because it gives them that half game little buffer. They win a game, the team above them doesn't. They still jump them. They don't have to worry about percentage being an issue. But there's
And
so many
also,
teams now. Well, there's so many teams in that area of the ladder now that have draws. So percentage then kind of comes back into play a little bit. But I Here's the thing that I kind of look at it is if you ask most Swans fan, there was a standout, and it wasn't in the forward line. It was Angus Sheldrick. Gushy
He was
Sheldrick
great.
was
Yeah.
absolutely elite. The young boy out of Claremont, who I think I said this to a friend of I said this to a friend of mine, and he agreed with me. I said, I think this is Luke Parker's heir because he plays so much like Luke Parker. It's creepy. They have similar body types, they have similar game styles, both tough as nails. They get under, they get the footy. They can be dangerous going forward a little bit. So I think Gussie Sheldrick is that rising star. They didn't have Chad Warner in this game, which I think made the delivery a little bit more difficult. I'm one of those. I do see some people's points. They're like, well, if once Buddy goes, where's the problem? Well, Armadi, Logan McDonald, and
Yeah.
Hayden McLean
They've
the
still
previous
playing.
week kicked like 14 combined. Yes, against the witches hats that were the Eagles, but
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those. I don't like jumping to conclusion on one game. Was this a horrible game? Because it was Isaac Heaney, Tom Hickey, and one other person altogether had 7 shot had 10 shots on goal, kicked 6 behinds and 2 out on the fulls,
Yeah.
and one that didn't make it. There's these weird statistics in this.
Sure.
It's such an anomaly game. Like I said, I agree with Coach Scott in this one. This is not one that you're going to it's not the tape you're going to pull up and watch again.
Oh no, definitely
You're going to get a few things out of it. You're going to toss it in the fire bin. You're never going to watch it again. So like I
not.
said,
Right.
entertaining. Both teams get 2 points. So we jump to the Adelaide Oval, and the Crows continue to purr. I am liking this Adelaide Crows team. They are my dark horse team that is not in the top 4 that I think could be finals if they catch form correctly. Now, did they play a ruse team that I still think they're still in kind of this helter-skelter purgatory of not really knowing what type of footy they want to play because Clarkson's still not there? Yes. But this is dangerous when Tex Walker, Isaac Rankin, and Darcy Fogarty are all on. That is scary going forward. And when Jordan Dawson, Laird, Keys, some of these midfielders are hitting targets, they can be absolutely deadly back
Yeah.
there. They're playing really well defensively, even with their young guy, even with their young players. They're getting just the right amount of impact from guys, including Riley O'Brien, the ruckman, who kicked 2 goals in this game as well, which is not
Right.
something he's known for. So this is
Exactly. And
a fantastic performance by the Crows here.
yeah, no, and to your point, O'Brien is rarely rated as one of the better ruckmen in the comp, but he's been just as important as anyone for the Crows. I reckon they're a team that much like Brisbane, they're catching fire at the right time. We know the home field advantage that they have at the Adelaide Oval. It's a circus. It's an absolute madhouse when they're playing and when they're winning. So, the Crows have definitely shown a lot this year. Like, their faith in Matty Nix and his system has really been rewarded. And you could kind of tell with them in previous seasons, like, Nix knew what he wanted to do, the kind of footy he wanted to play. He just didn't really have the horses yet, so to speak. But, when you bring in veterans like Jordan Dawson, when Tex Walker has the career rejuvenation that he's had, of course, Isaac Rankin is a massive addition. He might end up being, if it wasn't for Dawson, he might end up being their best and fairest. Or
Mhm.
even someone like Luke Pedler, who was talking about Luke Pedler last year. He's really come on. So has Thilthorpe. So have so many of the Crows kids. And the scary thing is their list is younger by like a
Mhm.
year on average than Northton. And I think you're right. The Roos are in purgatory. We know Clark was coming back in a few weeks, but at the end of the day, they're still not winning, regardless of who's in charge. And it's just, like there's definitely just been, inertia has kind of taken hold with the Roos, so to speak. It's just like they're just stuck in that purgatory of, competing, but just they can't win. They just can't put all 4 quarters of football. They have some quarters where they look really solid. We know what LDU can do. We know what Sheasel, Wardlow, Larkey, all those guys are really, really talented. And it's just such a shame that they're just trying their hearts out, but the wins just aren't coming because the Roos just are a bad footy club, and their fans are so loyal and they're really looking for that proof of concept there, but it's just, as promising as the first 2 rounds were, that was a long time ago. So I think, they've still definitely got a lot of soul searching to do as a club, in terms of They know who they're going to hang on to. Obviously, they're trying to lock in as much young talent as they can, but it's going to be a really tough year again for them. We all know that.
Yeah,
So,
the talent's there, and I think the talent is learning and growing. It's just one of those that they're running into buzzsaw teams, or they're just running into. They're so young, they make mistakes in situations they can't, and I think that's what's really burned them. Like they've had what, and I know some people are like, "How can you say this, coach?" They've had a lot of honorable losses. They played really close games to some teams that, I mean, you give them credit. They were in the game. They were
right.
there till the end. They just didn't come out with a victory. And unfortunately, some people say, "Well, what's up with an honorable loss?" Well, sometimes when you have a team like this, sometimes you have to take those and build off those. You just ran into a buzzsaw of the Adelaide Crows at their home ground. They're always really, really good there. Can the Crows find form away from Adelaide Oval? That's the $1 million question for them, because
Well,
you
they do
can't
have.
you can't win a
Sorry.
premiership at the Adelaide Oval, unfortunately.
Exactly. And I was just going to point out their run home. It's a mixed bag for sure. They've got Essendon at Marvel, GWS at home, Demons at the G, big showdown, second showdown of the year, round 20.
That's
Uh,
going to be elite.
technically, technically a home game, I think, for the Crows. They've also got the Suns at the Adelaide Oval, Brisbane at the Gabba. That'll be really tough. Sydney at home, and then West Coast on the road in round 24. So it's possible they can sneak into the top four. If they keep winning, it'll be hard not to, because I think we can all be honest and say that like spots 4 to like 14 on the ladder are like a jumbled mess at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So I think it's anyone's ball game in terms of like who gets spot 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mm-hmm.
Now, frankly, I think the Crows they're more or less a lock for finals, but I think we were saying the same thing of Essendon last couple of weeks, and now Essendon looks a little bit vulnerable. So, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, some of those games there at home, I think, will be quite interesting, and that absolutely scintillating second showdown is going to be elite,
Ooh,
especially if Port can keep their winning streak going. That'll be absolutely fantastic. So let's go to Marvel Stadium in a game that, again, this Fremantle Dockers team are such a tease for me, because they show greatness, they show really good abilities, and then they come up against a team that I think around where I think they should be on the ladder, and a team that I think on its day, if they catch them just right, they could beat. Again, falling a little short as the Doggies get the 29-point win, 102-73. Jamaro Ugle-Hagan, young man, thank you for showing up. Do me a favor, young man. Do this again and again and again and again. Don't
pick
disappear next
accurately.
week. Don't do it
Right.
again
Yeah.
next week, because this kid is incredibly talented. He is not the number who is not the number one pick overall for nothing. The kid is there, but he's just got to find some consistency. Now, I
Right.
almost have to, and I've heard this before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Rick. Do we have the thought that maybe Jamara should be the guy in the forward line instead of Aaron Naughton? Because in games when he becomes the guy and starts getting 3, 4, and 5, the Donkeys play
Yeah.
really, really well. Naughton has just not been able to show that consistency either. So, do we have a question of who's the guy in the forward line now? Because Jamara showed, when on his day, can be absolutely electric and kick 3 or 4 goals, great sticky hands, and just an incredible talent. And do we see maybe Naughton get moved to the back just to be able to kind of give some more space? Because in
Hmm.
games where Naughton has not really been the focal point, the Donkeys have played really well.
It's tempting. I mean, I'm sure, Bevo's considered every option. And yeah, Jamara has really had a hell of a run this year. Again, he's not as accurate as he should be. He does have a tendency to, be streaky from week to week. He's still a young kid. I don't think it's fair to put that pressure on him. Like if the doggies weren't pushing for a top four spot, yeah, but Hugo Hagen, he's still 20, 21 years of age, something like that. I think he's done a great job. What stands out to me the most is his contested marking is so much better. He's still got accuracy issues, but he's looking fit. He can take a contested mark. He's a great presence there in the forward line, but I don't think he's ready yet in terms of his development to truly be the number one guy heading forward. Now, I might eat my words. He might catch fire in September. You never know. And again, I don't think the doggies are top four material, but if they keep winning, they're going to be knocking on that door. And I know Bontempelli, I thought he was quoted just the other day, just very proud of Eagle Hagen and just like saying he's really, put all the hard yards in at training. He's being a sponge. He's asking questions. He's putting in the work. And, people are really gravitating towards him because, yeah, he's an exciting athlete, but there might have been some questions in the past in terms of his work rate. I think he's had all the talent in the world, but the point is he's doing a great job now, and if he's not their number one guy now, he will be very, very soon. So I think it's just a matter of time with him. But if I'm Bevo, again, given where we're at on the ladder, given where they need to be, not yet. I wouldn't pull that trigger yet. And Naughton, I mean, I think moving him to the back line, if he wants to do that separately, it might work out. We know he's a great user of the footy, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting. We'll go from there up to another game that I went into this weekend crossing my fingers that this didn't happen, and it did. Heritage Bank Stadium, as the Pies go up there, everybody was claiming sell out, sell out, sell out. And I went, yeah, it's going to be a sellout, and it's going to be a black and white sellout. And boy, was I right, as it seemed like 80% of the crowd were Collingwood supporters, and they were not disappointed as the Pies with a big 78-point win, 120-42.
Brutal.
Stewie Doo, sir, I feel so horrible for you because unfortunately, as soon as this loss is over, what is everybody talking about? Well, looks like Damian Hardwick will be coaching the Gold Coast Suns next year. And I went,
yeah.
oh, unfortunately, here we go again.
Right. And yeah, it happens all the time. And, the Suns just can never maintain that consistency as tantalizing as they look some weeks, and you feel bad for their kids, Noah Anderson at 35 disposals, 8 marks. Like they're really, like they just laid an egg, like they just weren't competitive and they needed to be. And I mean, like, again, mathematically, they might be able to, again, spots 5 through, 12 or 14 or thereabouts are a mess. Their percentage isn't terrible, but they've got Port Adelaide this coming week. Jared Witz is injured. Like they still need to get Tuke Miller back. It's not looking good for the Suns. They'll probably finish like 10th or 11th, which is good for them historically, but still not the 8, and that's what matters. So very disappointing. The Pies did things that the Pies do. Craig McRae is pretty much the best coach in the comp right now. So I think it's not surprising at all being firing on all cylinders. It's a cliche at this point, but another casual 36 disposals for Nick Dacos. I mean, this kid is sensational. 10 tackles, like he is just absurd. Like you might as well give him the Brownlow now at this point. Like I think, it's going to be hard to top anything that he's doing right now. So the Pies are top of the ladder for the reason, and yeah. So that's case closed, basically.
There's only one player that I think could raise their hand and maybe potentially spoil that, and that's Connor Rosie at Port Adelaide, because I think in some of the down weeks, the Dacos hasn't played as well, which again is weird saying down when he has 25 but has no goals. Rosie goes for 3 goals and 30 disposals, so it'll be. I think I think it's going to be interesting because I think it's going to be a young man's Brownlow. I think it's going to be Dacos and Rosie. Dacos and Rosie are going to be the top 2. I think in this one, and all's going to depend. It's all going to depend on, and they still have a matchup with each other later in the year at the Adelaide Oval. That could make or break it there for sure. So speaking of Connor Rosie, let's go to the G in the game of the round. And I know everybody wants to talk about Dan Houston burying the goal, no time left after the siren, wet ball, heavy legs. But I have to say this was an incredible game for the absolute horrid conditions, downpouring most of the game.
Incredible.
This showed you the skill level on both of these sides, but Port Adelaide does it again. Another fourth quarter, they are down and they come back and win it. You look at this roster and you go, no ruckman. Lysent ends up getting pulled
Yeah,
late in this. They have to have a rookie kid come in. They have no. The
yeah,
only thing that worries me about this Port Adelaide side now is that Dixon is walking wounded. You can't play Finlayson in the ruck the entire game. They don't really have anybody, and I don't think they want to pull Lear from the back into the
yeah,
ruck because he is doing so well in the back, unless you could guarantee Tommy Jonas could step up from the Sandful into a Lear
yeah.
spot, which
That's a gamble.
you just don't know how that's going to go. So Port get the win. I love it for Kenny Hinkley. Keeps the winning streak going, but
Yeah,
there are worrying signs for me as a neutral outside. I can only imagine what Port Adelaide fans are thinking. They get the win, they get it by the skin of their teeth, but there are some worrying signs in their ruck department that if they can't find a way to kind of, I mean, literally spit and glue this thing together enough to get them to finals. This could be interesting to see. Will this winning streak end soon rather than later?
and yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Donnie. It's yeah, like the ruck is such a tricky position because like three injuries there and you're kind of screwed. A lot of AFL teams have run into that in recent years, and like they're going up against the Suns, and Wits probably won't be available, so going to be a very weird looking ruck department when the Power and the Suns face off. But like I think the secret to Port's success this year has just been they're always going to have that one guy who stands up. At the start of the year, I think most people would have rated Dan Houston as like top five best and fairest, but no one would have put an after the siren goal in the pissing down rain on the bingo card. They
All
always seem to
Australian
have
too.
one.
I think he's almost a lock for all Australian this year. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think one of those is a lock for him in that halfback line. If he is not, it's kind of a travesty because every single game he is up there in disposals. He kicks goals. He's that halfback. He's not the Jack Sinclair, the Nick Dacos ones that is going to do the run and gun type of stuff. No, he's just very, very good with his disposal, and he can slip forward with that really long kick and kick those 50-meter goals. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw in that he might have been talked for best and fairest. I think he's almost an all Australian lock this year with how well he's played.
he'll be in the discussion, no question. I think, and we talked about Rosie, we talked about Zach Butters, who is also had some moments where he's looked like a Brownlow contender, and just again, role player guys who've really rejuvenated the way the rest of the competition thinks about them. Like Al Pepper's another example, or Bergman is another example. Those are guys who you know are great recruits and great players who've developed for the Power, but at the same time, clubs outside of Victoria, we know sometimes they get neglected. So I think on the surface they can still come across as underrated just because until they've won 12 straight, you don't even notice them sometimes. So, but yeah, hats off to Houston for an absolute ice in his veins finisher. It was the first one of the year, actually, first game-winning goal after the siren. There were three last year, which was interesting, because year to year, sometimes there's a lot of them, sometimes there's not. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. People were like, "Because Dan Houston's the best one ever," and I'm like, "Well, there's been some good ones. By
It reminded me a bit of
Jamie
the
Elliott last year, Jack Noons a few years ago from the boundary against Fremantle, which some
similar angle.
Fremantle fans still cuss that one because they think it shouldn't have been Jack Noons. It was probably somebody else, but we won't digress into that particular can of worms. So, in fact, speaking of Jack Noons, we'll go to the game at the MCG as Carlton with a smashing over Hawthorn 112-52. And I said this last week, and I really, really agree with this. This Hawthorn team, when Sicily is out of it, defensively, they're just not the same. They can't fill his role because he can play that fullback situation with kickouts, but he can also go to the halfback and be a great distributor. And
Yeah,
he's such a calming influence for that young defense that I think that his lack of being in the background has really hurt them. Did Carlton play well? Yes. Did Carlton play great? No, because again, DeConning goes out late. You have Jack Silvani, which that's another one of those where I look at it and I go, Voss, what are you doing? Silvani works his
not
tail
a
off
rubber.
every time that he plays. I just don't understand why he gets dropped. Again, I've reached out to some of my explain to me why Savani is not on the field, because he gives effort sometimes that some of the guys in this team had not. I hope that his effort in this game gets him another game, because if he gets dropped, you hate seeing the Silvani name leave Carlton, but I think his best ways should be to depart, because I think he needs to go to a club that's going to appreciate the efforts that he gives. For an undersized guy to play ruck as well as he does, I give the kid kudos. I give him tons of kudos. Like, I'd love to have hit that extra effort out of any ruckman, no matter if they're on size or undersized.
True. And no, yeah, like it was a brutal game for Hawthorne. Like they've, we know they have the youngest list in the comp. They're pretty schizophrenic at the moment. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've seen some amazing moments from them, and we know that what Sam Mitchell is building there. He just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, so congrats to him, of course. But they're gonna have weeks where they're just gonna get blown out, and that's really concerning because that's the problem with the young list. You want to be able to compete every week, and you don't want your players to just be content with competing. You want to actually bank some wins, but they're just in a position where you're right when they're missing the veteran guys like Sicily, they kind of just disappear. They're direction, but and no goals for the first half. I mean, that was utterly brutal. And again, Carlton was not playing amazing footy, but Chera and Cripps were doing their thing in the midfield, and they just were winning clearance after clearance, and just Doherty had a great game. Like they've definitely, it was a win that they needed, and it was a confidence booster for them. But of course, the Blues, like pretty much out of finals contention at this point. So definition of a Pyrrhic victory. So
It's Carlton is another one of those teams that I do feel for. I do feel for their fan base, because they went into this year with tons of confidence. They make the finals after falling just short, and
no
it just
doubt.
has not material. It just has not materialized. And then with the issues with Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow, both at times going on goal this year, it's been a tough year for the Old Navy Blues. They get a win over Hawthorn, but I think this is almost a lipstick on a pig situation. This is a win, but it's a win against a less than impressive Hawks team, unfortunately. So
And also, yeah, like, and you're right about the forward line. Kind of the same story there. Curnow was 3 goals 2. Mackay was 2 goals 3. Jack Martin kicked 3 goals, but then he got hurt again. He's a guy. He's a perfect example of a guy who has a ton of talent, who can really shine for Carlton in that role, but he just can't stay healthy, and he'll frequently just have to start over again in the VFL and earn his way back. That's just another example of the club itself, just showing so much potential in flashes and fits and spurts, but just not being able to put it together over a full season. So it's a shame because we know they're talented. That's never been the question this year. So
definitely be interesting. So we'll get to it. Here we are, the game that you so glowingly talked about. 8 degrees Celsius in Alice Springs, pissing down rain most of the entire games. You could tell as the Giants get a 47-45, a 2-point win over here.
yeah,
The smile on your face, sir. But this is going to be talked about more. And I kind of hated those. The Giants won this game, but most of the talk is going to be what's wrong with the D's, because
yeah,
they lose Bailey Fritz to the foot injury, and their troubles going forward just become even more glaring than they already were.
it's so strange because, like, I mean, yeah, on paper they're as talented as anyone. I've always thought Alex Neil Bowen is criminally underrated as a forward flank type. We know Petrarca can move forward and kick goals. Clayton Oliver is injured now. Of course, they're really missing him, but he can kick goals as well as anyone. But the issue is, of course, like, yeah, they just haven't had. Van Ruin has shown a lot of talent as a young kid, but you can't put all your hopes on someone like him. So I think it's a real concern without Fritch. He landed very awkwardly. That was opening quarter of the game. It was a really tough injury to see. So not sure what the prognosis is at the moment, but that's the exact opposite of what they needed. Now all of a sudden they look vulnerable, and they don't look like a top 4 side, and I think they're in danger of really just fading out the rest of the way. You know, they'll make finals, I'm sure, but they're in a precarious position right now, the D's.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I don't think they'll fall out of finals, but the worry for me with the D's is that if they fall out of the top four, that makes their role, that makes their run to get to a grand final that much more difficult because
Agreed.
you're looking at, you don't get that matchup potentially at the four spot with Collingwood, who you already beat earlier
Yep,
in the year with the kind of the style that you run. I think kind of matches up well against Collingwood. But if
it
you
does.
fall into you fall into that elimination final where you're going up against a Crows team that has they can play without an abandoned, because even if they lose, well, hey, they made the finals. That's something.
Yeah,
You get a doggies team on their day that can beat you when they get that right matchup.
right.
Fremantle has already shown they can beat you even at the G. I mean, and who knows? Does a Richmond, does a Geelong get in if they can find kind of their mojo a little bit? So there are more scary matchups outside of the four for the D's to lose an elimination final than if they would get to the four, because then at least they're guaranteed that second game and they would host it at the G with whoever they play. So I the D's just, Clayton Oliver's missing a little bit, I think has shown is a little more glaring than I originally thought he would be. I thought Petrarca, Viney, some of the guys, Angus Brayshaw can go in there. I thought they could fill it. They can fill it. But again, were the conditions conducive to the D style of game? No, I don't think so. I think GWS actually fit the horrid weather, the raining, the cold. I think they fit better because of the kind of orange tsunami style of get it forward a little bit like the Richmond where Kingsley came from, and
Yeah,
that doesn't kind of suit the slick ball movement that Melbourne can have at times, and their defensive strategy, because it's hard to get good footing defensively in rainy conditions. So this was one of
absolutely.
those, it's kind of a perfect storm against the D's, and this
Yeah.
throws them back in the mire a little bit. So it'll be fascinating to see how it goes.
Well,
And then
it's a really bad time for the D's to lose because
mhm,
their next 3 weeks: St. Kilda at Marvel, Brisbane at the MCG, Adelaide at the MCG. That
mhm.
is not easy. Even with all those games in Victoria, that is
Yep.
not an easy draw.
Not easy, but two at the G, and they do play the G well. Adelaide hasn't traveled as well. Brisbane hasn't traveled as well. So you can kind of it's scary because of the names, but if you look at the location, if trends go, you're smiling a little
Oh,
bit
I mean,
because you should be getting Clayton Oliver back this round. it, I think Van Rooyen comes back in for Fritch, if not even for Ben Brown. I think the Ben
yeah,
Brown experiment is over. I think Ben Brown needs to find himself a new club.
he's been
It's just
disappointing.
not working at Melbourne, unfortunately. He had the great year, he got the premiership, but I just don't think he fits Melbourne any with the team that they have now. I just don't think he fits, which is it's interesting to say. So
Right.
let's go to it. We have to go to it. I was watching this game, and I was in shock. I literally had halftime. I paused the game and I went, oh my God, am I seriously going to see this? As the West Coast just fall short of getting another win over St. Kilda. And I reached out to a couple of my St. Kilda mates and I go, how is your ticker today? And a few of them
Yeah,
gave me
it
some
was.
interesting answers. One of them told
Oh,
me he turned it off after three-quarter time because he was so worried that West Coast was going to find that St. Kilda was going to find a way to bugger it, like legitimately. So
right.
here's the thing though, and I'll say this: I'm happy West Coast figured something out, because as insipid as they were against the Swans, and I don't think it was all the Swans' ability as much as I am a Swans fan.
Yeah.
I can sometimes pull the one-eyed hat. Normally I don't. West Coast just kind of let them do it. It wasn't all Sydney. And West Coast this week had some fire in their belly. They had some fight. You had some guys show up that
Yeah.
didn't the last couple of rounds, including some experienced guys like Shuey and Gaff. Hewitt had 2 goals in this game. He only had 11 disposals, but his impacts that he had when he had the footy were absolutely fantastic. Oscar Allen with a couple of outstanding marks in this game.
Yeah.
There's some positivity. They still fall short, which kind of sucks, but hopefully Adam Simpson has found
Right.
something to maybe keep West Coast competitive, and St.
Agreed.
Kilda can go, whew, because
Right.
they just almost became the embarrassment of the AFL, losing to a team that are coming off an 171 point drubbing.
Right. Well, again, you just wanted the Eagles to show something after the loss to Sydney. And you're right, Shuey, 28 touches, 9 tackles, really showed some captaincy, to quality leadership. And I think, yeah, like we know they're going to have to get rid of some veterans. Inevitably, plenty of Eagles are going to be on the chopping block this offseason. But Shuey puts his hand up and says, hey, I'm sticking around. This is how we're going to respond. We lose by 8, but at the same time, just the fact they were leading at quarter time, the fans gave them a standing ovation.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been averaging something like 40K fans at Optus, even in the midst of such a horrible, horrible season. So those fans deserve something to cheer about. Again, they did not bank the 4 points, but at the same time, you're right. Finally showing some signs of life. Oscar Allen is a keeper. They know what they have with him. Hewitt, some of the other young kids who were able to really compete and show that they were AFL grade material. So we know they're wooden spooners this year. We know it's going to be a really tough slog for them ahead, but like that was definitely a step forward. And if they can steal a couple of wins down the stretch, then their fans can sleep better at night. So with the Saints, again, their forwards just are not kicking accurately, or they're just disappearing. And I don't like calling out players publicly, of course, but Max King only had 1 goal. Jack Higgins continues to struggle with his accuracy. 1 goal 4, I think he had. And Mitch Owens has been great. I love what I'm seeing from him. He might be is he still eligible for NAB Rising Star?
Yep, he's. They said
I
that
think he might get it.
well, if they're hearing the votes, they said him,
Yeah.
Sheasel, Ashcroft, and there's one other one that they said that it's going to be neck and neck. They said it may come down to round 24, and if somebody has a stellar game late as to who will actually be the one getting that rising star. So it's a competitive one. Mitch Owens, I think in the long run, I don't think he'll come up short. I think Sheasel, Ashcroft, and some of the first year rising star kids, I think, are probably going to be the ones fighting out for. But Owens has definitely not let it be easy for those top guys. So that's going to do it for these 9 games. And as we said, there's so many fun things to talk about. Like I said, I love seeing the Eagles getting some success, not the 4 points, but some success, which is absolutely great after the abysmal game before. So we go to burning questions, and keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a little bit different this week, so keep an eye out. So we're going to start with it. I will start with my first. I'm interested to hear what you think, Rick, especially being a Giant supporter. What team outside of the 8 right now? So we're talking. So if I pull the ladder up really, really quickly, starts with Geelong, GWS, Fremantle, Gold Coast, Sydney, Carlton, and Richmond. I think are still all in there. So that's one. So that's 15 through 9 there. What team do you think will make finals this year, and who will they be replacing?
Very tough. I would say, and I was definitely more. This will spoil it. I was more confident in them after or before the draw, but I would say Geelong. And no, it's not just because they're in 9th. I think just again, it's not been a typical year for them. We know that. We know they've had injuries, but I still have enough faith in Chris Scott's system that he'll get them back into the 8. Now, will they do any damage in the 8? Probably not. But they're probably gonna limp into the 8. Let's be honest here. But given the way that Essendon is currently tracking, I think they're in danger of missing the 8. Yet they do have again, a famously easy stretch home, but they've got the Crows next week and they've lost their last 2. So now Essendon's percentage is still pretty good, but it's not as good as Geelong's. They're at 113, Essendon's at 106 right now. So that's my instinct right now. But stranger things have happened.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this. I'm with you. I like Geelong just because that fact they're only 2 points back. I think, like I said, out of the 2 between Sydney and Geelong, the 2 points really helped Geelong more than it helped Sydney. If I don't go with the cheap and easy one, honestly, because Fremantle plays well at home, I like them. I just think GWS, they do have their moments where they become Jekyll and Hyde a little bit. They have games where they kind of go away from it. I think Fremantle is sitting right in that spot where those games that they have at home, they usually win. They've
Yeah,
sometimes found a way to win games outside of Western Australia. So I think Fremantle is the one that I look at and say, but that loss to the Western Bulldogs has kind of dampered that a little bit for me. So it's like
yeah,
I would love to say Gold Coast, but I just think no
yeah,
Jared Witts, no Tuke Miller, all the negative energy at Gold Coast with Damian Hardwick for Stewie Do conversations. Sydney, I think their run home is too difficult. I think same thing with
yeah,
Carlton. And I think, like I said, Richmond, Sydney this week, I think the loser, this is an eliminator. You win
yeah.
this one, you have a chance still. You lose it, you're done. And that's kind
Right.
of the way it goes with it. So Geelong would be my obvious one, but I think if you don't do Geelong, I would say Fremantle there. And I agree with you. I think Essendon, just because they're right
Yeah,
there, they have the lower percentage of the two at the bottom. They're not playing the greatest of footy. There's still some issues defensively a little bit, which is interesting for a coach, another Coach Scott team defensively
yeah,
having issues. But I think it's more of the players that he has. You can't teach them everything that he needs them to know in one off season. So I think
sure.
this Bombers team will progress as the years go on because his system will be more and more into the fabric of the Bombers.
Yeah,
This year they're gonna be a little helter skelter because they're dealing with players that haven't had to play a lot of good defensive footy in previous years. So I think
I think
Essendon. Go
yeah, no,
ahead.
I agree with you. I think the Bombers are honestly kind of in the same boat as the Giants in terms of being overachieving first year coaches, kind of. But and yeah, I think you do run the risk there. And even as a Giants supporter, I can admit that of, if you make the finals in your first year and you get killed, because that could conceivably happen given, let's be real, the top three, top four, and the gap between the rest is pretty wide most
Mhm.
weeks. There's obviously been plenty of upsets, but I don't know if the Giants or the Bombers, like, given that they're both young, fairly young teams, like what that would do, like a big finals blowout loss would do for a young team that really needs to just keep progressing. You want to make the eight, of course, but again, a big loss can scar you a little bit the next season sometimes. So I
Mhm.
think with Frio, they do have quite a few home games left, including a few key ones that I've got my eye on. They've got Brisbane and Port Adelaide in round 21 and 23, both at home. They are playing West Coast again in Western Derby Part 2. So the Dockers, like the Suns, they're not mathematically out of it, but they feel like they are because,
Mhm.
again, both sides were really disappointing on the weekend. So but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I do think Nat Fife getting injured again is really he wasn't in great form, but that's still a blow for the Dockers. And also just again their forward line, just those issues continue to pop up even when John Amos is looking phenomenal. Sonny Walters had a really good game, but other than that, they didn't really have many forward targets at all. So, and given when the Doggies just went on a tear this on the weekend and put the game out of reach, the Dockers really exposed. So you're right, very Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, it'll be quite interesting. So we'll jump to this. I kind of brought this up when we talked about the game. So Port Adelaide survived the Bombers. They get the win. They keep the win streak going.
Right.
But does this tight game help them as the season goes on, or does it really hurt them? Because, like I said, the injuries now at the ruck position have me a little bit concerned.
Agreed. And you'd like to think that, having a midfield as ridiculous as Wines, Rosie, Butters, all these ridiculously talented athletes in the engine room, you'd like to think that, of course, Geelong has famously, had an amazing midfield, but in the ruck department, they're pretty average most of the time. So that's a very risky gamble to take. And Lysette is very underrated veteran ruckman. He doesn't get enough credit until this year again, because Port's been impossible to ignore. So I am a little worried about that for them. At some point the winning streak does have to end, but again, they're just continuing to figure out a way to win. And yeah, you can look at those close wins in two different ways, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
oh, we're gaining experience in close games now so that we can win the close games in September. That's
Mhm.
the glass half full view, of course. But of course, there's also like, well, why are you letting, Essendon was clearly an inferior team, but they were allowed to hang around there way too long. And yeah, again, terrible, tricky, wet conditions, but the power really needed to they really needed a huge lift, and obviously Dan Houston provided that. So yeah.
Well, it's a little bit like the Collingwood experiment last year. Everybody was like, if you look at it, 11, they had 11 come from 11 wins, the
Yeah.
11 game win streak, but 6 or 7 of them were games where they had to come back. And I
Right.
kept saying going into the finals, I kept saying, as much as it's great that they do this, the problem is that they're doing it against teams you can't do that to. You can't let
Like,
a 15th, 16th, or 17th seed make you kick one after the siren. And what happened in the finals last year with Collingwood? They play Geelong, they lose late. They play Sydney, they lose late. So it's like as much as it's scintillating and you get a big win, it's a recipe for disaster come finals time because you're not playing an inferior team. You're playing one of the best teams each and every round to make it to the grand final. So is I I think their style of play and the team that they have, I think they'll be okay, but it just worries me because can they shark ruck taps if they just kind of let themselves get beat? Because with, as you kind of said, the scary part of Butters, Rosie, Horn Francis, Boak, Wines, Bergman, Drew, they've got a ton of guys that can roll through there that on their day can be absolutely deadly with footy in hand if they can get the clearance. So it'll be fascinating to watch this Port team. And how long can this streak go is the other question that I have. So normally, ladies and gentlemen, we have Ross's question. Now, in my conversations with Rick, getting this all set up, Rick goes, I've got some questions for your burning questions. So I've given Ross the week off. We'll give him his buy round this week. Rick, you have some burning questions. Let's hear what you've got.
yes, sorry to steal your thunder, Ross, but he's a Giants fan as well. He'll forgive me. So, yeah, no, but I have a couple of questions. So going back to Frio, and their kind of inconsistencies. I know a lot has been made of their captaincy. Of course, it's Alex Pierce this year. Who's it going to be next year? And before I get your opinion, I think it should be. I know a lot of people are pointing to Sarong by himself. I think
Mhm.
it should be Sarong and Brayshaw. So, what are your thoughts on who the Dockers should name heading forward, regardless of whether or not they make the eight?
I actually love it because in the first thing when you first started the question in the back of my head, I went Caleb Sarong is mine because one of
Yeah.
the things in this bugs me about American sports and I don't like when the captaincy is just given to the best player. It annoys me because I think the job is already difficult enough being a captain. I don't like it when it's put on the best player. Like I think sometimes it's pressure that's unnecessary. I like giving it to a player that maybe he's a little, shall we say, under the radar, but is going to do everything that a captain should do. They're never going to be somebody that you're going to worry about a disappointing performance on. You're never going to worry about what you're going to get from them. The consistency is there and they show leadership qualities both on and off the field. And that's one of the biggest things that annoys me when it comes to the captaincies. Don't just give it to your best player.
Right.
You got to give it to a player that's going to model the behaviors that the entire team needs to show. Because if you do that, sometimes a team can take on, whether it's the coach or the captain, can take on that mentality, and sometimes it'll push you through in ways. I like Sarong. I love Brayshawn, but it's another one of those. Let Sarong have it. If you think that it needs to be split up between the two of them, yes, I think Brayshaw and Sarong can really both do that. I think it's a great combination. But if it just is one, I think Sarong, because let Brayshaw play. Let Brayshaw is your best player. Let him just be him. Sarong's kind of the underrated, but he's going to work his tail off every time. He's going to give those little things. So I would say Sarong by himself, but if you really felt that it needed to be split, I don't mind Brayshaw being the co-captain.
Yeah, they've both put in the hard yards. They know what they're doing, and yeah, you're right. It's about being consistent, being a leader, and being a person of good character too. Someone who's
Mhm.
going to lead by example, on and off the field. And I think Sarong and Brayshaw, again, they've really matured and developed really nicely in terms of, they're guys you want on your side. And,
Mhm.
Frio's definitely been up and down, as they typically are, but they've definitely got some, real stars in terms of, the future of the club.
Yeah,
So,
and I would, and if and I had to snag ones that maybe somebody wouldn't be talking about, is either Brennan Cox or Luke Ryan, the two defenders there, because I think
yeah.
they seem to always just play that steady game. I kind of thought Hayden Young, but I think Hayden Young, I just kind of want to let him be him, let him play his game. So either
Oh,
Cox,
I put him in the leadership group for sure.
oh
He's
yeah,
definitely shown a lot.
definitely.
I do definitely like the other guys as well. Fox, he might be All Australian this year, and Ryan has been All Australian in the past as well. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of great talent there in the back line. So
Yeah, definitely for sure. So any more?
yes, this is already, it actually hasn't really been touched on. Come to think of it, McWalter for Richmond. After the bad loss to Brisbane, is the honeymoon over? And should they start over, or should they, still consider promoting him to the full time role?
This is the topic that I think I'm surprised has not been. I think it's kind of been more of the Sydney Geelong game has got a lot of conversation. I think Melbourne's loss, I think, is really kind of it's
Yeah,
grabbed a lot of attention. Do I think the McWalter discussion is a little early? Yes, because we're still in the depths of this season. Is a one game bad performance an instant killer of a potential caretaker coach to the full time? It shouldn't, but I've noticed it does sometimes. It's a negative. It's a red check mark on you that is hard to delete unless you get like an equally massive victory or an upset that you're not supposed to. The one thing that I've heard a few media outlets go is like, well, look at the records of some of these caretaker coaches that got the job because of good performances, and look what their next record was. Like you look at Noble at North Melbourne, you look at Shaw at North Melbourne, you look at
Teague at
Yep.
Carlton, right?
Teague at Carlton. You look at I'm trying to think of some of the other ones because there's been so many over the last couple
Right.
of years. St. Kilda, no, Essendon, and like caretaker coaches that they play well, they get the job, and the next year not so much. So it's like, do I think the decision should be let it marinate, let McWalter finish the season because I do honestly think he's got a lot of qualities. He really hasn't changed much from Dema, so I don't know if we can really say that we know everything that he's going to do because if he were to get the job, he may change a few things coming to the off season. So
Yeah.
I hate jumping to that conclusion. Do I think he's got a right to make the argument? Yes, because I think he's kind of tightened a few things up. Again, Richmond is one of those. They annoy me because they're so undisciplined at times, even under Dimma. They take a
Yeah.
lot of stupid 50s and a lot of stupid free kicks that I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
and for such a manic team that you kind of fell in love with because of the style that they played, so much pressure. There was the yellow and black army just got absolutely nuts there for a bit. But there was so much undisciplined play at times that really annoys me that
Yeah.
I think Dimma let go a little bit that really kind
Agreed.
of rubbed me the wrong way. Can McQualta reel that in a little bit? I haven't seen it yet, but again, he's relatively new on the job.
Right.
I don't want to make any calls on him because there's still enough footy. Can if some would say, well, what if Richmond makes the finals? He's got a strong argument,
Right.
but
I
but yeah, there's way too many. There's way too many hypotheticals right now.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, obviously I think they shouldn't make any knee-jerk decisions, and they'll let him finish out the year, no question. I
Mhm.
think and no, it's I don't agree that like one bad loss means, he shouldn't get considered for the full-time role, but like you were saying, caretaker coaches, interim coaches, whatever you want to call them, again, the recent success is not good. So, and also just again, like Richmond, regardless of how McWalter does the rest of the way, I think they kind of just have to admit, at the end of the year, premiership window is officially closed. Hardwick's gone. It's a very high possibility that Dusty, Cochin, Jack Reevil, or maybe all three are going to call it quits at the end of the year. Personally, I think Dusty and Reevil definitely will. Cochin might play one more year. Who knows? He's shown, he's had some good games this year, but at the same time, his body's catching up to him. So
Mhm.
either way, they're going to have to hit the reset button at the end of this year. So they don't want to be looking to the past glory, and they need to figure things out. And again, they've still got plenty of talent. They can do potentially what GWS and Essendon are doing this year, and there's still enough talent on the list to jump up back into the conversation with the 8 next year under whoever the coach is. But again, I think they just have to admit, hey, it's the end of an era. We need to, rebuild the core of the footy club around, Bolton, around Balta, around McIntosh, Boston, those other guys who are also part of the flag sides, but they're the next generation of leaders at the Richmond Footy Club. So yeah, I think they just need to move on at the end of the year.
Yeah,
So
it'll be fascinating. So, and then I'll end it because I've done with some of the podcasting guys, and I kind of want to let him. I kind of want to let him have his time to talk his beloved Giants. So I asked this of you, Rick, with the Giants win over the D's. Do you think finals is still a possibility this year for the GWS Giants?
very unlikely. Again, I'd love it if it happens. Again, I'd be afraid that we would get killed in the presumably in the qualifying final, or elimination final, I guess. But no, yeah, I think again, we've shown more than enough proof of concept. Again, I came into the year thinking we finished 12th on the ladder, but again, I knew the players were going to respond to Kingsley in terms of like his system really getting absorbed. And, we've been able to have some great upsets even before Melbourne. We beat Geelong. Of course, we beat your Swans. I think there's definitely finals next year is not out of the question. I think finals this year would just be a huge bonus as far as I'm concerned. I definitely think there's plenty of great things to build on. We'll see how aggressive we're going to be in free agency. I think overall, in terms of the young kids that we've got coming through, like the Giants Academy and the other draft avenues, like it's a great list overall. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to play it conservatively and develop more young kids, or if we're going to actually go out and try to, Ben Mackay might be available as a fullback. Bill Davis is heading towards retirement most likely. Then I think the Giants are definitely going to have their eye on some people, but for the rest of the year, I think again, try to string some more wins together. We've got a great opportunity this coming week against the Hawks, so that could be 5 of the last 6. So never say never.
Definitely. And I look at it like this. I think the next 4 games are going to make or break you. Hawthorne this week most likely should get a win. Tough one at Adelaide Oval, at home at Manuka Oval against the Gold Coast Suns, and then the Western Bulldogs. That sneaky little rivalry that you have with the Duggies before your game with the Swans. So I think going into the Swans game, I think you're going to be able to tell whether finals is still an opportunity or
Yeah,
not. I agree with you. If they can get on a run, if they get out of this run 3 out of the next 4 going into that Swans game, you're
yeah,
definitely in with a chance. It'll definitely have to
right.
see how that goes. So we go from the burning questions to kind of the point, as I said, I kind of take over the podcast a little bit. So another team of the week here, Rick. So I'm interested to see what you think of this. So the round 16 team of the week, we start on the defense. Again, being a coach, you always start defense wins championships. I know the comment is plethora over here. So we start off on the fullback line, Fremantle's Brennan Cox, Melbourne's Stephen May, and GWS's Isaac Cumming will be the fullbacks. Halfback line sees Collingwood's John Noble, Port Adelaide's Dan Houston. You kick a game winner. There's no reason you can't get in here. And Carlton's Sam Doherty will be the halfback line. In the mids, on the wings, you see Brennan Campbell from the Sydney Swans, and Josh Kelly of the GWS Giants will be the wings. In the center, sees Sydney's Luke Parker, Port Adelaide's Connor Rosie, and Carlton's Adam Chera. The ruck, giving the big man some love, Adelaide's Riley O'Brien gets the ruck spot. In the forward line, sees Half forward line sees Brisbane's Joe Danaher, Collingwood's Jamie Elliott, and St. Kilda's Mitch Owens. The full forward line sees Darcy Fogarty and Isaac Rankin of the Adelaide Crows and Western Bulldogs Jamarl Ugle-Hagan. We go to the bench. The Western Bulldogs defender Bailey Dale, Ruckman Sean Darcy from the Fremantle Dockers, Gold Coast's Matt Rowell of the Gold Coast Suns, and Fremantle's Jai Amiss of is the forward to round out the team of the week. A very interesting group there. Some great performances. The midfield, I was surprised how many 2 and 3 goal kickers we had in the midfield this round.
Yeah, that I'm not really sure what that would really tell about the round. What do you think?
It was very interesting for sure. So I found it fascinating that they had Josh Kelly marked as a wing, and I watched his looked at his heat map, and he pretty much stayed
Yeah,
in the wing in this game, so it was
he's
easy to get
such a
him in.
versatile midfielder.
In fact,
Yeah,
he kept Elijah Hewitt out. I had Elijah Hewitt from the West Coast, even though he had 11 disposals, but kicked 2 goals,
he
and
did.
it was Josh's 2 goals that kind of knocked him out. Since Braden Campbell kicked 2 goals and had 26 disposals, he's really stepped into the Sydney Swans wing spot, and really made it his own. Him and Errol Goulden, the 2 academy kids, have been put on the wings, and they've really played well. It's the one issue I have with Sydney a little bit is they have a plethora of really good wing players, but they really can't go into the middle right now. I don't think they're ready to go like dead middle in the square right now as of yet. So they've kind of got a plethora of wide players, and they're still. I love that Gussie's starting to play well, so I think we might have figured that the depth a little bit for there. So we jump to the power rankings, and I'm gonna chuckle. I'm gonna chuckle at this because with all of the upsets, this thing keeps bouncing around. It looks like clowns trying to go up a mini ladder at a circus. It's absolutely hilarious. So start at number 5, the Western Bulldogs with 2 wins in a row, starting to kind of find their mojo. Number 4, the Brisbane Lions, absolutely lead it to GABA. Still a little sketchy on the road, but we'll have to see. Number 3, I'm going to get a smile out of this. The GWS Giants come in at number 3. Number 2, the Collingwood Magpies. And number 1, again, 12-game win streak. It's hard to not keep you there. The Port Adelaide. The Port Adelaide Power round out the power ranking. So we get to what I think is the most interesting part of the entire podcast, and that is tipping. We run round 17 and some
All right.
absolutely scintillating games here. I'm really looking forward to this. We start on it in a few days from recording Thursday night footy, 4:20 wake up for me here in Des Moines. So anybody that knows me, please pray for me that Thursday morning, because I am going to be a nervous wreck. Whether I get sleep or not will be the question, as the Sydney Swans go down to the Melbourne Cricket Ground to take on Richmond in what I call an elimination game. Who do you like in this one?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, it's lazy to say Richmond because it's at the MCG, so I won't. I think the Swans will bounce back. I don't think it'll be a pretty win, much like a lot of their wins haven't been very pretty this season. But yeah, I'll tip the Swans by a goal.
I'm normally in this situation, I tip against Sydney, and I do the double thing. I tip Richmond because if I get the tip right, I get the tip right. If I miss, then at least I get Sydney right. I'm gonna tip Sydney because I don't think Sydney is as bad at the MCG as people are making out after the kind of 2 dismal performances that they've recently had with Melbourne and then Geelong in the grand final. I just think Richmond's style still fits, and it defensively Sydney matches up well. Um I think the Tom McCartan should be back. He's played a couple of VFL games. He's looked good. I think he might be back, which is perfect because that gives the Rewalt matchup. They don't have to worry about Lynch yet. And I think Sydney, when they don't have to face Lynch, always matches up well. So I'm going to tip Sydney in this, but this is a cracker. I think Thursday night is not a drubby game. I think it's going to be a fantastic one. I think the Swans win it, but by a goal or less. I think this comes
Okay.
down to the wire. So we go to the Friday night game, another scintillating one at Marvel Stadium as the Western Bulldogs host the Collingwood Magpies. As much as I would love to see the Doggies win this one to kind of bring the ladder a little bit closer, I just think the Pies are just a little bit too good. Liam Jones was not a big miss against Fremantle, but in this game, he could be a devastating loss not having him in the back line with this line. I think Collingwood just too good. I, 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 I I'd love to see the doggies do it. I think the doggies have the personnel in the midfield to stay with Collingwood, but it's that loss defensively, I think, is going to be too big a hole to fill.
I mean, yeah, we don't talk enough about the doggies. You know, they've got a good home ground advantage at Marvel to some degree, and yeah, like they've been on fire lately. But the Pies have been better, and yeah, I'm tipping the Pies here by, let's say, 3 goals and some change.
That'll be interesting. We jump to it. I don't think I have to ask you this one because I think I already know the answer. At the GABA, Brisbane Lions, West Coast Eagles. The West Coast Eagles somehow pull a miraculous upset and knock off the Lions, or is this an ugly one? Could we see 200 points again put up on the Eagles?
I don't think they'll let that happen again, given how they responded this past week. Again, yeah, it was still a loss, but they looked a lot better than they have all year. Brisbane won't get to 200, but I reckon they'll win by 7 goals.
Yeah, I think Brisbane pushes it. I think they get I think they get
Yeah.
close to 150.
Well, again,
I,
percentage is absolutely crucial this time of
because
year.
you gotta look at it. West Coast was at home, so they had the fans. You get a little bit of energy off that. St. Kilda traveling all the way over to Perth. It'll be interesting. I unfortunately I think this is another big loss. I think this is another 100-point loss. I think Brisbane gets to 150. I don't think they get to 200. I think the
Yeah,
Eagles have a little bit more pride in this game. They don't become witches hats. But I think Brisbane's offense, if they can find the goals and kick straight, this could be a very long game for the blue and gold at the Gabba. So we jump to it. Giant Stadium, GWS v Hawthorn. No Sicily, no win for the Hawthorn Hawks. GWS win this one. But the Hawks are competitive. They're a scrappy bunch. GWS just a little too good at home.
yeah. I'd say 3 goal margin of victory for the Giants. And again, that'll make it 5 of the last 6 wins. So.
All right. This one's got me bouncing back and forth. I can't wait to hear what you think. Marvel Stadium, St. Kilda v the D's. Both teams sometimes offensively going on goal could be sketchy. This could be a team who kicks more behinds, wins the game.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing, and you're right. I'm very split on this one as well. Could definitely go either way. Not sure if it's an elimination game like the Sydney game, but it definitely feels like it for the Saints and the D's. So no joke, if Rich hadn't gotten hurt, given the way the D's forward line has looked, if Rich was healthy, I'd tip the D's, but he's not. So I'm tipping the Saints in this one. Yes, I know they haven't strung together back-to-back wins since they started 4-0. So they've been very, very up and down, but they are at home. And, it's kind of do or die time for them. So I think Ross the boss is going to have them ready. I think it's contingent upon the guys like Max King really needs a big game. Mitch Owens needs to continue doing what he's doing. Wangani Malira, he's a guy that I'm very high on, but he was pretty quiet on the weekends. And, Dan Butler was okay, but, not amazing. I think all of their guys just really need to step up and make a statement against the D's. And again, this one could really knock the D's down and send them spiraling and get the Saints back to where they need to be because they are fifth on the ladder. And again, that's a precarious spot right now. So the Saints need to make a statement, and I think they actually might.
Call me a glutton for punishment. I'm going to tip the D's and only because I don't like King versus May. I think Lever and May can shut
That's good.
him down. And if King can't get going, I think Butler and Higgins and some of their small forwards have a little bit more trouble. If King is clunking it, or if King is at least getting it down to his crummers, then it's easy. But if Lever and May and Hibbert and Rivers, some of that really good kind of defense that Melbourne has, it could take away a lot of that ground ball that Higgins and Butler and some of these really quick small forwards can feast on. St. Kilda, on the other hand, it's one of those. Cal Wilkie has had an incredible season. Dougal Howard is really solid as well. Like I said, Wanganeen Miller, I think, has been played really, really well. But Clayton Oliver, if he's back, may lead Christian Petrarca to go forward. And I don't know if anybody on the St. Kilda lineup can stop Petrarca one-on-one. Is Petrarca that Dusty Martin kick 3 goals in a game? Right now, he hasn't been that consistent yet. I'd like to see it with no Bailey Fritsch. I think this is the point. If Oliver is back, I shift Petrarca forward. I put Angus Brayshaw and Viney in the middle, and I may even let Chandler go up a little bit more, even onto the ball a little bit, maybe even Keziah Pickett into the center, just to throw a few different things at the St. Kilda team. I think Goodwin's going to throw a few things at the wall this week, and it may just stick. I like the D's a little bit just because the talent there and potentially the looming addition of Clayton Oliver is one I think just a little bit too much. But I agree with you. This is there for the Saints. This is the perfect time to get the D's with the Bailey Fritz injury. So this is a close one. Another one late in the fourth quarter for sure. Go over to the Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide versus Gold Coast. If the Gold Coast team that showed up against Collingwood shows up in this game, this is a Port win no matter who's the ruck. So I think it's Port. I think Dew has a lot. I think Dew is in a situation where he is. This has got to be a win, and this is the worst possible team to get at the time.
Yeah, no, it's the Suns have a tough draw the rest of the way, and again they're almost mathematically eliminated at this point, and yeah, questions about Dewey's job security are definitely going to be happening. Of course, I think Port's going to win by 4 goals,
All
but
right.
this is having Collingwood and Port Adelaide back to back, like yeah, the footy gods were not smiling on the Suns at this point of the season, that's for sure.
If they would have played Collingwood close, this isn't the game.
Yeah,
This isn't the palm to forehead game that we're talking like it is. If this was if it was a close game, like 10 points or less, I'd talk about Gold Coast in much better light. But the fact that Collingwood smacked them around on their home turf again, like I said, it was the MCG North with all of the Collingwood fans there, so it was a bona fide road game for the Suns, even though they were at their own arena. So I mean, this is just it's bad, absolute bad scheduling for the Gold Coast Suns here. So it's just kind of makes Stewie Doo's future that much murkier. So we jump down GMHBA Stadium. Geelong v North Melbourne. As much as I'd love to see the Roos throw a hitch into the Cats finals potentially, I just don't see it. And I have to say this before we go. Congratulations, Zach Tui will break the record of Jimmy Steins for the most played games by an Irishman. Congratulations, Zach. Absolutely love it. He's an
he's a legend.
incredible player. Totally respect him. The stash is fantastic.
Yeah, no, he's had a phenomenal career, and of course he's won a flag. There's only a few Irishmen who won a flag, so it's yeah, no, he's had a phenomenal career, and Jimmy Stein's like, if you have, I implore everyone who's watching or listening to this, read his book. He was a great man, and he did a lot of great stuff in the Melbourne community after his retirement. So gone too soon, but again, he's had an amazing legacy for all the other Irish guys who've come over to Australia since, and Tui's a huge part of that. So hats off to him. But yeah, I don't see the Cats losing this one, and we know where they're at on the ladder. They're going to bank the percentage, so this one could get ugly. I'm tipping the Cats by 8 goals.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Marvel Stadium, Essendon v Adelaide Crows. Can the Crows get a win on the road and get
Mm,
themselves that good conversation of can the Crows potentially, if the D's stumble, get into the top four? I
yeah,
like the Crows in this one. I know it's weird, not at the Adelaide Oval, but I think Essendon is reeling after a tough loss. Sometimes when you go into a game like that, you was in the wet, so you're going to have a little bit heavier legs. The Crows had a much easier time with the Roos. Perfect time to get them under the roof at Marvel Stadium. Fast deck fits the Crows perfectly. I like the Crows in this one, but I think it's a humdinger on Sunday night.
I agree. I'm tipping the Crows by 10 points. I think it's going to be really close. But yeah, I think you know, the Bombers, they've yeah, they definitely had a really crushing loss after the siren. I think Parrish, Merritt, the usual suspects in their midfield are looking really good, but their forward line just doesn't inspire much confidence right now. And I know 2 Meter Peter had a pretty serious shoulder injury, kicked 5 goals when he came back, but he's been AWOL the last couple of weeks. So I think he's the X factor. If he can, bank a few and kick a bag and keep the Bombers competitive, then this might be a different story. But as of right now, I think the Crows are just looking too hot at the moment, and also it could potentially be a statement game for Tex Walker to make his claim for the Coleman because he's still leading it. And I think, there's going to be some separation in that category here in the next few rounds.
Mm-hmm. Last game of the round. This one is intriguing for me because this one, no matter who wins this one, it's going to be fascinating to talk. Fremantle at home, Optus Stadium versus Carlton. Who do you like in this one?
This one is a toss up. I think, you can kind of read into what you want with either team to some extent. Frio's looked better as of late, but still not great. Again, they really faded away. They had the lead. They had the lead by a few points against the Doggies, and then the Dogs kicked 4 straight goals, and then it was pretty much over in the fourth. So the Dockers really need to use that as motivation. I mean, Carlton is a club that I don't want to say they can out muscle or out tackle, but at the same time, I'd tip the Dockers midfield right now over the Blues, just because, the Blues just continue to find ways to lose games. So I think it'll be close, but I'm tipping Frio by 2 goals.
That'll be interesting. Just Fremantle at home, Carlton. I just don't trust them. I just don't trust them, especially when you can drop guys like Jack Silvani who give you tons of effort. I think Fremantle, again, at home, they find a way to get it done. They just have found a way when they're in the confines of Optus Stadium to play better. I like the Dockers in this one. Carlton stays in this because of some of the headaches that they have going forward. If Mackay and Curnow can both kick straight, it could be a long night for the Dockers defenders. But if they are anywhere wayward, I think the Dockers will make them pay for it. I like the Dockers in this one. But again, there aren't too many bad games in this round. Like I said, the Brisbane one is not looking real good. Geelong North may be ugly, but almost all of the other games have some kind of intrigue to them that's going to keep me very much awake for many of these games. So Rick, that is going to do it. Another fantastic conversation. Like I said, I genuinely appreciate you able to hop on here. Gil will be on the podcast a little bit later on in the season. He just had a few things come up, so I don't feel the liberty to be able to say anything about that. It's just one of those. He wasn't able to watch all of the games, so he didn't want to come on the podcast and be unprepared. So I love Gil about that. He is very, very prepared when he comes on. So I wanted to give him that opportunity. You will see the fantastic Gil Griffin later on in the season, so keep an eye on it. So Rick, again, stay awesome out there, sir. I know it's not always easy in California. Keep good luck with the Dragons the rest of the year. And it's fantastic talking with you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Donnie. Take care.
Awesome. Awesome. That is going to do it for our episode. Ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye out. More coverage of everything footy and interviews still to come. That'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposal.
Here's the song.